Friends, listen carefully. In our lives we chase many things: pleasure, attention, friends, and social approval. We think that being around people, talking, and seeking their company will make us happy. But consider this: every time we give our time to others, we lose a part of ourselves. Excessive socializing steals your time and energy. Time is the most valuable thing you have, yet it slips away faster than we realize when we spend it constantly with others. Every hour spent in idle conversation, every minute devoted to entertaining the opinions and desires of people around us, is an hour taken from the care of our own mind, our own thoughts, and our own growth. The moment we give ourselves over to socializing without purpose, we surrender control of our attention. Attention is like a flame. It can illuminate, it can guide, but it can also be scattered and wasted if not guarded carefully. When we are constantly reaching out to others, when our days are filled with endless meetings, casual chatter, or even small talk that carries no meaning, we are allowing our inner flame to flicker and fade. Energy too is finite. We may not think of energy as a currency, but every interaction, every conversation draws from it. A single encounter can leave us mentally exhausted, emotionally drained, and less able to focus on what is truly important. The mind, like a muscle, requires rest and deliberate cultivation. Without moments of quiet, the mind becomes weak, distracted, and reactive instead of strong and reflective. Socializing, when done excessively, consumes this energy without producing any lasting strength. We may feel temporarily entertained or validated, but this satisfaction is fleeting. We are left with less time to think deeply, less time to consider our actions, and less space to nurture understanding of ourselves. The human desire for connection is natural, but it becomes dangerous when it dominates our hours. Many people believe that their value, their happiness, or their sense of purpose depends on being surrounded by others, on being constantly engaged in social activity. Yet the truth is that this constant engagement often hides emptiness. Instead of gaining anything real, we lose the most precious resource we have: the quiet moments in which the mind sharpens, the heart understands itself, and the soul prepares for meaningful action. Every invitation accepted out of habit, rather than necessity, carries a hidden cost. Every moment spent in the pursuit of social pleasure takes away from the pursuit of wisdom, from reflection, from the cultivation of virtue, from the careful attention to our own character. When you socialize excessively, you begin to fragment your attention. You are never fully present in one place or one thought. Your mind splits between anticipating what others will say, reacting to their words, and maintaining appearances. This constant division of focus prevents you from achieving clarity. The clarity that comes from thinking deeply, from observing without interruption, from acting with deliberation. This clarity cannot exist in a mind scattered by constant social stimulation. Socializing itself is not inherently wrong, but when it dominates your life, it becomes a silent thief. It takes not just your hours, but your ability to think, to reflect, and to act according to your own reasoned judgment. Excessive socializing also interrupts the natural rhythm of our lives. There is a natural cycle in which a person must withdraw, reflect, and act with intention. When we fill our lives with constant interaction, we prevent these cycles from forming. We deny ourselves the opportunity to learn from our own thoughts, to plan carefully, and to develop self-discipline. Instead, we are reactive creatures, responding to the whims, moods, and desires of others. Our energy is no longer our own. It is borrowed and spent on things that often carry no lasting significance. We forget that true strength comes from independence of thought, from focus, from the disciplined use of our own faculties. Excessive socializing undermines this independence and scatters the energy that could otherwise be used to build a life of purpose. The cost of constant social interaction is not always obvious. It does not announce itself loudly, and it rarely feels immediately painful. But over time, the effects accumulate. The mind becomes restless, the body becomes tired, and the spirit loses its calm. The more we allow ourselves to be drawn outward, the less we develop inward. We fill our days with noise and distractions, and in the process, we lose the quiet strength that comes from solitude and reflection. This is why excessive socializing can be considered one of the greatest thieves of human life. It robs us of our time, our energy, and our potential for inner growth, leaving us busy but empty, active but weak, distracted but never fulfilled. It makes you dependent on others' opinions. Every time we place importance on what others think, we give away a part of our freedom. The mind is most powerful when it is self-directed, when it can evaluate situations and make judgments based on reason rather than the shifting desires and judgments of those around us. When we constantly seek approval, praise, or validation, we surrender control of our own thoughts. Our sense of worth becomes fragile, built not on our actions or understanding, but on the unpredictable responses of others. People are never consistent, their opinions change with their moods, their environment, and their fears. To rely on them for confidence or direction is to build a house on sand. The stronger a person's reliance on social approval, the weaker their independence becomes, and the further they drift from their own judgment and reason. Dependency on opinion affects every part of life. When we worry about what others think, we adjust our behavior to match expectations rather than to match our principles. Every action becomes a performance, every word filtered through imagined reactions. We lose the clarity that comes from acting according to reason and virtue. The mind becomes preoccupied, constantly calculating, weighing, and predicting. Instead of making decisions based on careful thought, we make them based on fear, desire, or the hope of recognition. This fear is subtle. It disguises itself as polite caution or social awareness, yet underneath lies a quiet erosion of autonomy. The more we focus on pleasing others, the less we focus on mastering ourselves. When opinions dominate our thinking, emotions follow. Pride, shame, and envy arise easily in such a mind. We feel joy when we are admired, yet that joy is fragile and dependent. Similarly, criticism, even minor, can wound deeply, because we have allowed ourselves to anchor our sense of value in something external. The mind that seeks approval from others becomes reactive, its peace easily disturbed by events beyond its control. Emotional stability is lost because it is given away to people who may not even be aware of the influence they hold over us. The quieter the mind is, the less it reacts unnecessarily, yet dependency on opinion forces the mind into constant motion. We are no longer free observers of life, but captives of others' judgments. The danger is compounded by the fact that most people are unaware of their dependency. They think that seeking approval is natural or even necessary. They confuse social comfort with personal strength and believe that being liked equates to being virtuous or worthy. Yet wisdom is found not in the applause of the crowd, but in calm reasoning, in the ability to live rightly regardless of external reactions. When we act with independence, the opinions of others may exist, but they do not control us. We can hear criticism and remain composed, we can hear praise and remain humble. The mind that relies on its own judgment is anchored in stability, whereas the mind that relies on others is constantly tossed by waves it cannot predict. Dependency on opinion also affects the use of time and attention. When we worry about reputation or recognition, we spend hours imagining what others think or how they will respond. We plan speeches, adjust actions, and weigh every word for potential approval. This is time that could be spent learning, reflecting, or practicing self-discipline. Energy is spent on things that offer no real gain, while the mind grows restless and unfocused. Each day, we are pulled outward, distracted by imagined evaluations, instead of inward, cultivating independence and clarity. In addition, dependency on opinion fosters a kind of weakness disguised as social grace. People who prioritize approval often avoid necessary actions that might invite disapproval, even if those actions are right or necessary. Courage, honesty, and integrity are often sacrificed for comfort and recognition. The mind becomes timid, easily swayed, and unable to act decisively because the guidance of reason is overridden by the fear of others' judgments. In this way, dependency on opinion is not only a loss of freedom, it is a loss of character, because it replaces inner strength with external validation and masks cowardice as courtesy. The world is full of distraction and empty talk. Everywhere we look, there are countless voices demanding our attention, offering opinions, sharing gossip, or simply filling the silence with noise. These distractions appear harmless, even enjoyable at first, but they slowly erode our focus and weaken our mind. When we constantly engage with the chatter of the world, we lose the ability to think clearly, to reason deeply, and to act with purpose. The mind is not meant to scatter its energy on endless trivialities, it is meant to observe, reflect, and make deliberate choices. Every conversation that carries no real value, every story that entertains without teaching, every argument that accomplishes nothing, consumes a piece of our attention and leaves less for our own development. Empty talk is not just wasted words, it is a form of subtle corruption. When we participate in conversations that have no meaning, we train our minds to move lightly across matters without depth. We grow accustomed to surface thinking, and our ability to focus on what truly matters diminishes. The danger is that we often mistake business for progress, noise for knowledge, and connection for understanding. The world seems full of activity, yet much of it is empty, and by allowing ourselves to be absorbed, we risk losing touch with reality. Real understanding and wisdom come from reflection and careful consideration, not from being carried along by every passing word or trend. Distractions are everywhere. Social events, messages, meetings, and casual chatter all compete for our attention. The human mind is drawn naturally to what is immediate and vivid, yet these distractions often offer no long-term benefit. They demand our presence, yet leave nothing behind. The more we indulge in these distractions, the less capable we become of thinking independently. The mind that is constantly engaged with the noise of the world cannot develop the calm, deliberate clarity that is necessary for discernment. Instead, it becomes reactive, flitting from one stimulus to another, shaped by whatever is loudest or most insistent, rather than what is true or necessary. Even seemingly productive social interactions can carry hidden distractions. Conversations often wander, focusing on personal grievances, trivial successes, or fleeting opinions. We may imagine that we are learning or building relationships, but if the interaction lacks purpose, it quietly diminishes our mental strength. The mind becomes accustomed to being pulled in multiple directions, to reacting without reflection, to valuing entertainment over thought. This is why the simplest, most solitary practices, quiet reading, contemplation, self-reflection, are often the most effective ways to cultivate wisdom. They allow the mind to remain focused, undisturbed, and able to develop depth. Another danger of distraction and empty talk is that they shape our emotions. When the mind is constantly exposed to idle chatter, rumors, and superficial judgments, it begins to respond instinctively. Anger, envy, or frustration arise not from reality, but from reactions to irrelevant words or opinions. We give power to things that have no lasting importance, and in doing so, we weaken our emotional stability. A mind focused on meaningful pursuits is calm, patient, and resilient. A mind absorbed by the trivialities of the world is restless, reactive, and easily disturbed. The world's distractions also interfere with our sense of self. By constantly turning outward, we lose the habit of turning inward. We forget to examine our own thoughts, to measure our own intentions, and to observe our own character. Life becomes a series of interruptions, and the mind loses the ability to maintain its own rhythm. Instead of shaping our actions with reason, we respond to external pressures, becoming dependent on circumstance rather than guided by principle. The more we indulge in empty talk, the more we train ourselves to live superficially, valuing entertainment, opinion, and appearance over thought, virtue, and self-mastery. Participation in distraction often feels necessary, even natural, because it is everywhere. Yet the constant noise of the world is a thief. It robs us of time, clarity, and strength. The mind that succumbs to distraction and empty talk loses its power to direct itself, to think critically, and to live deliberately. It becomes a mind shaped by others rather than by reason, and by passing amusement rather than by enduring purpose. In a life dominated by distraction, one forgets the value of silence, the importance of reflection, and the strength that comes from directing attention inward, rather than outward. Solitude strengthens the mind and self-control. In the quiet of one's own company, away from the noise, opinions, and demands of others, the mind finds the space to observe itself. When we spend too much time in social interaction, we give our attention to the thoughts and judgments of those around us, leaving little room for reflection on our own actions, desires, and intentions. Solitude allows a person to become aware of their own mind, to notice its patterns, its weaknesses, and its strengths. It is only in moments of isolation that one can confront personal fears, temptations, and impulses without distraction. The mind becomes sharper when it is left to face itself, to understand itself, and to discipline itself. Self-control is not something that comes easily in the presence of others. When surrounded by people, the mind is constantly reacting to opinions, reacting to praise or criticism, reacting to social norms and expectations. Each reaction draws energy and focus away from deliberate thought. In solitude, these external pressures vanish, leaving the individual free to direct their attention inward. The process of reflection requires quiet and focus. Without solitude, reflection is shallow, interrupted, and dependent on fleeting impressions from the outside world. A person who practices solitude learns to govern their thoughts, desires, and impulses rather than being governed by them. Through solitude, the mind becomes resilient. External events, comments, and distractions have less power over someone who is accustomed to spending time alone and thinking deeply. Solitude teaches the individual to find contentment within, rather than in the approval or company of others. The mind that relies on others for happiness becomes fragile, easily disturbed by social fluctuations. In contrast, the mind trained in solitude remains steady. It develops the capacity to assess situations calmly, make reasoned decisions, and act according to principle rather than impulse or peer pressure. Solitude also cultivates clarity. When free from the constant chatter and opinions of others, the mind can see situations more clearly. It can examine cause and effect, consider consequences, and understand the nature of human behavior without the distortion of social influence. The individual learns to distinguish between what is necessary and what is trivial, between true needs and fleeting desires. Without solitude, life becomes a series of reactions, a constant adjustment to the expectations of others, and a surrender to distraction. The mind grows clouded by unnecessary information, and judgment becomes weak. In addition, solitude encourages self-reliance. When we are alone, we must rely on our own reasoning, understanding, and discipline. This reliance strengthens the mind and fosters independence. We no longer seek constant reassurance or validation from others. The ability to make decisions without needing approval or guidance from the crowd is a hallmark of self-mastery. A person who spends time in solitude becomes capable of handling difficulties with composure and facing challenges without fear. Strength of mind grows from facing oneself, understanding one's own limitations, and cultivating the ability to act rightly even when no one is watching. Solitude is also a training ground for virtue. In the absence of external distractions, we can observe our impulses, temper our emotions, and refine our character. Patience, courage, honesty, and humility are all strengthened when practiced inwardly, without the performance demanded by social interaction. The more we practice solitude, the more natural these qualities become. The mind develops the habit of considering actions carefully, reflecting on consequences, and acting according to reason rather than habit or desire. Finally, solitude provides the time necessary for growth. Knowledge, wisdom, and understanding are cultivated through reflection, study, and deliberate thought, all of which require uninterrupted attention. Socializing, when done excessively, fragments attention and limits the time available for meaningful development. Solitude, by contrast, offers uninterrupted hours in which the mind can explore, question, and understand. It allows a person to grow stronger, wiser, and more disciplined, preparing them to face life's challenges with clarity and composure. True freedom comes from mastering your own thoughts. Most people think freedom means doing whatever they want, moving wherever they wish, or being unbound by external rules. Yet this kind of freedom is an illusion, because it depends entirely on circumstances outside of oneself. True freedom is not found in the world around us, it is found within. It comes from having control over one's own mind, from understanding one's impulses, and from choosing carefully what to accept and what to reject. When the mind is mastered, a person is not swayed by anger, fear, or desire. They do not allow praise or criticism to disturb their peace. They act according to reason rather than habit or impulse, and in this way, they achieve a freedom that cannot be taken away by circumstance. Most people live without this mastery. They let every passing thought, feeling, or opinion dictate their actions. They become prisoners of desire, seeking pleasure wherever it appears, and running from discomfort whenever it arises. They allow their emotions to rule, giving in to anger, envy, or frustration without thought. In this state, one's life is determined not by reason, but by external forces and internal weaknesses. Every social interaction, every distraction, every opinion of others becomes a chain that binds the mind. The individual may feel busy and engaged, yet in truth, they are controlled by forces beyond their mastery, and true freedom remains out of reach. When we focus on mastering our thoughts, we create independence. We no longer rely on others for guidance, approval, or reassurance. The mind that is free does not need constant validation. It is not dependent on the moods, judgments, or actions of people around it. Instead, it finds its strength internally, and its peace is unshakable. Even when the world criticizes, mocks, or challenges, the person with mastery over their mind remains calm, undisturbed, and able to act according to reason. Freedom, therefore, is not the absence of restraint from others, it is the presence of self-discipline and clarity within oneself. Mastering thoughts also brings clarity and discernment. The mind that is untrained wanders constantly, following every whim, emotion, and distraction. It mistakes noise for significance and reacts without understanding. A trained mind, however, pauses before it acts. It evaluates situations carefully, understands consequences, and chooses responses based on reason. In this way, the person who masters their thoughts is free from impulsive behavior. They are not controlled by anger and conflict, by fear and uncertainty, or by desire and temptation. Their mind acts as a sovereign, making deliberate choices rather than responding to external pressures or internal weaknesses. True freedom also allows for a deeper sense of contentment. When the mind is mastered, It does not depend on external pleasure or approval for satisfaction. Joy and peace arise from within, because the individual is no longer ruled by the changing tides of circumstance. The mind that is free can endure hardship without complaint, face criticism without distress, and accept praise without pride. Emotions are experienced fully, yet they do not dictate action. This kind of freedom is stronger than any external liberty, because it cannot be taken away by fortune, fate, or the whims of others. Mastery of the mind requires effort, but it is the most worthwhile effort one can make. It is cultivated through reflection, discipline, and careful observation of one's own impulses. Every time a person resists the urge to react impulsively, every time they question a fleeting desire, and every time they act according to reason rather than emotion, they strengthen their freedom. It grows like a muscle, becoming more resilient with practice. The mind becomes a space of calm and clarity, impervious to chaos, distraction, and the judgments of others. Socializing without restraint often undermines this freedom. In constant engagement with others, the mind becomes reactive, attentive to the approval, criticism, and expectations of those around us. It loses the ability to act independently. True freedom, therefore, is strengthened not by constant external interaction, but by deliberate control over one's own thoughts, by careful reflection, and by the cultivation of self-discipline. The more one practices mastery of the mind, the less one is controlled by circumstance, and the more one achieves the kind of freedom that is enduring, independent, and unshakable. Fewer distractions lead to greater clarity. The human mind is a delicate instrument, capable of profound thought, deep understanding, and deliberate action, yet it is easily scattered. Every interruption, every casual conversation, every pursuit of trivial matters pulls attention away from what truly matters. Clarity of mind requires focus, and focus requires the removal of unnecessary distractions. When we are constantly pulled outward, when our attention is divided between countless demands, opinions, and amusements, we lose the ability to think clearly. The more we reduce distractions, the more space there is for reflection, understanding, and the development of wisdom. Distractions are more dangerous than they appear. A brief conversation may seem harmless, a short message may seem insignificant, yet each draws energy from the mind and shifts attention away from deliberate thought. Over time, these small losses accumulate. The mind becomes restless, reactive, and shallow. It no longer considers consequences, examines motives, or weighs alternatives carefully. Decisions are made hastily, often influenced by fleeting emotions or the expectations of others. In contrast, when distractions are minimized, the mind can move deliberately, examining each situation fully, and choosing responses based on reason rather than impulse. The quieter the environment, the sharper the thinking, and the more precise the judgment. Clarity also comes from the ability to observe without interruption. The mind that is constantly stimulated cannot notice patterns, evaluate causes, or understand relationships. It reacts instinctively, guided by surface impressions rather than deep understanding. When distractions are removed, however, the mind becomes capable of observation. It can step back from events, consider different perspectives, and form judgments grounded in reason. This clarity allows a person to act with purpose, to prioritize what is important, and to avoid being led by trivial or fleeting concerns. In this way, reducing distractions is not simply about quiet or peace, it is about strengthening the mind's capacity to see and understand clearly. Distractions also cloud judgment because they foster emotional turbulence. Constant engagement with social opinions, casual chatter, and trivial matters generates unnecessary reactions, frustration, envy, irritation, and impatience. Each reaction further clouds the mind, making calm, rational thought difficult. By reducing distractions, the mind is freed from these disturbances. Emotional energy that was previously spent reacting to the world can now be directed inward, toward reflection, self-improvement, and understanding. The less the mind is disturbed by irrelevant matters, the more it can act with composure, insight, and effectiveness. Fewer distractions also improve decision-making. When the mind is overburdened by competing stimuli, decisions are made hastily, often influenced by what is immediately visible or socially convenient. The mind loses the ability to weigh long-term consequences against short-term gain. When distractions are removed, each decision can be considered carefully. The mind can deliberate, assess, and choose according to principle rather than impulse. This leads to more consistent, rational, and wise actions. Clarity emerges from this careful deliberation, and clarity leads to strength, freedom, and mastery over oneself. The presence of distractions also diminishes learning. A knowledge and understanding requires sustained attention, patience, and repetition. Constant interruption prevents the mind from absorbing ideas fully, from reflecting on them, and from applying them thoughtfully. When distractions are minimized, the mind can focus entirely on the matter at hand. Thoughts can be explored deeply, connections can be made between ideas, and understanding grows. The individual becomes capable of insight, rather than simply reacting to surface appearances or the latest opinion. A clarity gained from fewer distractions also allows for better self-awareness. When the mind is not pulled outward constantly, it can turn inward. Habits, impulses, desires, and weaknesses become visible. Reflection becomes possible. The individual can examine motivations, correct errors, and align actions with reason rather than habit. Each distraction avoided strengthens the ability to see clearly, act deliberately, and cultivate wisdom. Finally, minimizing distractions strengthens resilience. A mind accustomed to focus and clarity is not easily disturbed by sudden events, social pressures, or the judgments of others. It remains centered, calm, and capable of thoughtful action. Every distraction removed is an opportunity for the mind to grow stronger, sharper, and more capable of seeing the world as it truly is, free from the distortions of trivial concerns, unnecessary chatter, and superficial engagement.